Okay, so we're diving into Growth, A History, and a Reckoning by Daniel Susskind.
Yeah.
And this is not going to be your typical, like, economics lecture, all right? This book is, it's about economic growth, but it takes a really interesting twist.
It does.
Because Susskind, he basically says that this whole idea that we need to constantly be chasing more stuff, more money, just more, that's actually a pretty recent obsession.
Yeah, and it's funny to think if you sat down with like Adam Smith
Right.
and said, "Hey, what's the goal? Like, is it just endless growth?" He'd probably be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, I mean, it's not
Such
like
a new idea.
it's not like they had Black Friday sales in ancient Rome or
Like
anything.
Black Friday, no Cyber Monday.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Susskind really digs into this idea. He calls it the long stagnation.
Right.
And he's got like the data to back it up, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking analyzing skeletons to figure out how tall people were thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And guess what? Someone from 10,000 years ago was roughly the same height as your average European dude, like walking around in 1800.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, that's a long time for living standards to just stay basically the same.
So wait, are you telling me that for, like, most of human history, life was just sort of steady?
Yeah.
No big leaps forward or anything?
Pretty much, yeah.
Huh. That's kind of wild when you think about it.
It is, right.
It makes you wonder, like, if the Industrial Revolution was this big turning point, this, like, explosion of progress, why didn't it happen sooner?
Yeah.
You'd think that out of all the brilliant minds throughout history, someone would have stumbled onto this whole growth thing a little bit earlier, right?
You'd think so, but here's where Susskind throws in a bit of a curveball.
Okay.
He says we have this tendency to look at the Industrial Revolution as like this sudden burst of genius.
Right.
But he's arguing that it was actually much more about the specific economic conditions that were happening in Britain at the time.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it wasn't just like brilliant Brits just cranking out inventions left and right.
No, not exactly.
So what was it then?
Well, think about it. Britain had relatively high wages compared to other places,
Okay.
but their energy was really cheap because of all the coal they had.
Right.
So suddenly, it became incredibly profitable to invent things that would, save on labor, even if they used up a ton of fuel.
Ah. So you're saying, like, the steam engine, that wasn't some inevitable stroke of genius?
Right.
It was more like a product of those very specific economic forces at play.
Exactly. Susskind calls it induced technological change. Like, the context made those labor-saving, energy-hungry inventions the ones that made economic sense. The same invention might have been a total flop somewhere else because the costs and benefits would have been totally different.
That is mind-blowing.
It is.
It really makes you realize how much context matters, even for the things that seem like these massive leaps forward. But, let's be real. This whole constant growth thing, it hasn't exactly been all sunshine and roses, has it? We've got climate change, we've got inequality. There are definitely some downsides to this whole thing.
For sure.
It's like we built this whole system on this idea that more is always better, but now we're kind of seeing the cracks starting to show.
Yeah, it's like,
You know what I mean?
yeah, totally.
Like, it's not sustainable.
And Susskind calls this the growth dilemma.
Right, the growth
Yeah,
dilemma.
and it's not like people haven't noticed, right? I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are proposing solutions.
Right.
Like one of the big ones is this idea of degrowth. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I've heard that one tossed around.
Yeah, so it's basically saying, like, we need to shrink our economies.
Yeah, like hit the reset button on this whole, like, growth obsession.
Right, exactly. But Susskind, he says that...
And it's appealing. I mean, on the surface, it sounds good.
Yeah, it does. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But Suskind's argument is that degrowth is kind of stuck focusing on the wrong thing.
Cool.
It's too focused on just material resources. Right. It's like saying, okay, we're running out of ingredients, so we need to bake a smaller cake.
Okay.
But what if, instead of baking a smaller cake, we found entirely new ingredients?
Right.
Or what if we found a way to bake a cake without using up any ingredients at all,
Okay, I like where you're going with this analogy.
Yeah.
So he's not saying, like, we all need to go back to the Stone Age and live with less stuff.
No.
He's saying we need to be, like, smarter about how we grow.
Right. Way smarter. And he says that real growth, like true growth, it comes from ideas.
Okay.
And the potential for new ideas, well, that's basically limitless, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about that example who uses the one with the...
the chicken ice cream.
The chicken ice cream, yes.
I mean, as much as that flavor combination makes me want to, like, lose my lunch.
Right. It's terrible.
It's a good example, though.
It's a perfect example. Because even if it's a terrible idea, and it is the fact that we can even think of something as bizarre as chicken ice cream,
Right.
it just shows you how many possibilities are out there.
So many possibilities, yeah.
So instead of like just trying to divide up a finite pie,
Yeah.
Susskind wants us to bake a whole new one,
Okay.
a better one.
I like it.
He calls it directed technological change,
Right.
being intentional about the kinds of futures that we want to create through innovation.
Okay, I am on board with this whole like directing progress thing.
Yeah.
Instead of just letting it happen to us. But how do we actually do that? It's not like we can just snap our fingers and like get self-filling pizza ovens.
Right,
Although that would be amazing.
that would be great, wouldn't it?
Right. Sign me up.
But Susskind says that governments really have a key role to play here.
Okay.
Because right now, we just kind of accept whatever technology comes our way, right?
Right.
The good, the bad,
The good, the bad, and the chicken flavored.
and the chicken flavored, exactly.
Exactly.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
So he's not just saying like innovate more, he's saying innovate smarter and with a purpose.
With a purpose, yeah.
Okay, I like it. But how do we make that happen? How do we get people to innovate smarter?
Well, he's got some pretty radical ideas, I'll say. That one of the big ones is rethinking this whole system of intellectual property.
Okay.
Like, think about patents.
Yeah.
They're designed to, reward people for past inventions.
Right.
Give them a monopoly for a certain amount of time.
Right. So they can like cash in on their good idea.
Exactly. But what if instead of just protecting those old ideas, we focused on, really incentivizing new ones?
So instead of patents, we'd have like prizes.
Prizes, exactly.
Like the first person to invent a commercially viable fusion reactor wins $1 billion.
Exactly.
Okay, now you're talking. That'd light a fire under some researchers for sure.
Exactly. And Susskind says that it's not just about intellectual property. We need to rethink this whole system of research and development.
Okay, so you're saying like throwing more money at labs and universities, that's not the answer.
Well, funding is important,
Right.
but he's arguing for a more fundamental shift, like how can we make that research funding more efficient? How can we design systems that help us generate new ideas faster,
So streamline the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it work better.
And get this, he even hints at this possibility of replacing human researchers altogether.
Whoa. Hold on a second. With what? Like robots got AI.
Yeah, he's a little vague on the details,
Yeah.
but it definitely makes you think.
It does. But before we get too far into like the future of research and all that,
Yeah.
I think it's important to take a step back for a second and remember something like really crucial.
Okay.
This book that we're talking about, this
Yeah.
isn't just about like cool gadgets and technological breakthroughs. It's about confronting like some really big kind of fundamental questions about what we really value as a society.
It is, yeah. And I think that's what makes it so much more than just, an economics book.
Right.
He's not just talking about how do we make more stuff. He's asking, what kind of future are we building? And is it a future we actually want to live in?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's like Suskind's really pushing us to think beyond just like, more growth for the sake of growth.
Right. Exactly.
He's asking us to like really think about what matters.
Yeah. And he says that we've become so focused on GDP.
Yeah.
Like, GDP is the measure of progress, right?
Oh, right.
But it's really a flawed metric.
Yeah, it is. It's like we're so busy like chasing this number, this GDP,
Right.
we've kind of forgotten to even ask, like, is it actually making our lives better?
Yeah. And that's where I think Susskind, he really throws down the gauntlet.
Okay.
He doesn't just critique this, session with GDP. He challenges us to think about some really, really tough questions.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Okay, well, how much are we willing to give up in terms of, material wealth
Okay.
to achieve other goals, right? Are we cool with our iPhones being a little less cool
Okay.
if it means that the planet is a little bit healthier?
So you're saying it's about trade-offs.
Yeah, exactly. It's about trade-offs and are we willing to accept maybe slightly slower growth
Okay.
if it means that we have a more just society?
Right.
And these are tough questions.
They are tough questions, yeah.
Because it's easy to say, yeah, I'm on board with that.
Right. In theory.
In theory, it's easy, but in our day-to-day lives, are we really willing to give up, that shiny new gadget?
It's hard.
It's tough.
It's a tough sell.
It is. And Susskind, he doesn't pretend like there are easy answers here, you know?
Right.
He's not saying, here's what you have to do.
Right.
But he is saying, like, we got to be honest with ourselves about, like, what matters most.
Okay, so trade-offs, that's a big one.
Yeah.
What's the other big question that we need to be asking ourselves?
Okay, so this one's a bit of a doozy.
Okay.
How much should we care about future generations?
Oh, wow.
Right.
Like the people who haven't even been born yet.
Exactly.
That's a big one.
It's a huge one, and Susskind, he calls this long-termism.
Okay.
This idea that we have a moral obligation to think about the well-being of people who haven't even been born yet.
Wow.
Trillions of people potentially living thousands of years from now.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah. I could barely plan my next grocery list, let alone, like, think about what life is going to be like in the year 4000.
Right. But Suskind's point is that we can't just ignore these long-term consequences
Right.
of the things that we're doing today.
Okay, that's fair.
It's tough, but we got to think about it.
So how do we even begin to balance those, like those urgent needs that we have today with the,
Right.
with this like kind of vast potential of the future? It seems overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. And Susskind, again, he doesn't have all the answers here.
Right.
But he offers up some really interesting ideas.
Okay, like what?
Well, he talks about how we need new ways to make decisions as a society.
Okay.
Like new forms of democracy,
Well, yeah.
where it's not just, politicians and experts making these decisions for everyone else.
Right, so more like citizen involvement in these big questions.
Exactly, because these questions affect all of us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we should all have a say.
It can't just be like a bunch of academics in a room somewhere deciding the fate of,
Exactly.
the future.
Right, and I think that's one of his most important messages, this idea that the future isn't,
Okay.
it's not predetermined.
Right.
It's something that we are creating through the choices that we make every single day.
So what can we do? It's not like we can all become economists overnight.
Right.
Or policymakers.
Right.
Like what can the average person do?
Well, I think for starters, we can start having these conversations,
Right.
with our friends, with our families,
Yeah.
just bringing these issues out into the open.
Right, so it's not just like an academic debate, anything.
Exactly. The more we talk about it, the more we're going to find solutions, right?
Okay, I like it.
It's about changing the conversation.
So it's not just about how do we make the economy bigger, it's about what kind of world do we actually want.
Exactly. And beyond just talking about it, support organizations that are out there
Right.
doing good work.
Yeah.
Think about the choices that you make as a consumer.
Right.
Support companies that align with your values
That's
and,
right.
and get involved, right to your elected officials.
Right, like make your voice heard.
Make your voice heard. Exactly.
It's about recognizing we all have a role to play,
We all do.
even if it feels small.
Absolutely.
Like we can all do something.
We all have a part to play in building this better future.
Yeah,
That's really what this book is. It's a call to action.
I like that.
It's saying get involved.
Yeah.
This is about more than just inventing new stuff. It's about creating a world where everyone has a chance to thrive.
That is a powerful message to end on.
It is.
So to everyone listening out there, don't be afraid to ask those big questions.
Don't be afraid.
Challenge the status quo.
Right.
And never underestimate your power to make a difference.
That's right.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive
Yeah, this was great.
into Daniel Susskind's really thought-provoking work.
It really was really interesting.
Until next time.
See you later.
It's your